It's brand new, Season 2. I'm Marissa Thalberg.
And I'm Stephen Wolf-Bedeta, and we're excited to be back having bigger, bolder, and always real conversations.
Straight from the C-suite front lines of marketing, media, and more.
We have great friends joining from people you may know, like Wilmer Valderrama and Bobby Burke.
And people you'll want to know. So grab a coffee or, hey, even an Aperol Spritz and come join us on America's #1 podcast network, iHeart.
Listen to Brand New on the iHeart Radio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi there, I'm Bob Pittman, Chairman and CEO of iHeartMedia. I'm excited to announce a new season of my podcast, Math and Magic, Stories from the Frontiers of Marketing. Our guests this season show us big risk can yield big rewards, like Rob Riley, the creative head of one of the world's leading advertising firms.
I try to create environments where anybody can say anything without any judgment.
Listen to a brand new season of Math and Magic on our very own iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcast, or wherever you get your podcast.
Hey there, I'm Dr. Maya Shankar, and I'm a scientist who studies human behavior. Many of us have experienced a moment in our lives that changes everything, that instantly divides our life into a before and an after. On my podcast, A Slight Change of Plans, I talk to people about navigating these moments. Their stories are full of candor and hard-won wisdom. And you'll hear from scientists who teach us how we can be more resilient in the face of change. Listen on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Episode 410, How Much Cash Should You Have Saved? With Brian Preston of The Money Guy.
Welcome to the Frugal Friends podcast, where you'll learn to save money, embrace simplicity, and live a richer life. Here are your hosts, Jen and Jill.
Welcome to the Frugal Friends podcast. My name is Jen.
My name is Jill.
And today we are talking about cold, hard cash. How much should you have? How much do you want to have? What can it do for you? So many people talk about how sexy investing is. And nobody talks about how sexy cash is. Right? So, but how much should you have? And that's what we're talking about today with Brian Preston. He is a financial advisor. He's one of the hosts of the Money Guy show. And he has so much to say on so many topics. So we thought we'd ask him about the least interesting one.
But first, this episode is brought to you by Chippies. Salty, crunchy goodness that no sandwich is complete without. Kind of like your inbox without the Friendletter. It's lacking that extra treat, the little bit of zing that makes you feel better about eating at home. If this is you, don't wait to treat yourself to all the freebies, savings tips, and spending hacks in our free newsletter called the Friendletter, frugalfriendspodcast.com to sign up, get them in your inbox. Chippies, the only thing that makes peanut butter and jelly sandwiches worthwhile.
That is offensive. As somebody who makes a peanut butter and jelly sandwich every single day of her life, not for myself, always, but Chippies are the investments of the snack world, right? So what would cash be?
Just the peanut butter and jelly.
Cash is the peanut butter crackers. Peanut butter crackers are bad. They're not a good snack. They're not a good addition to a sandwich.
Why is this offensive to you, though? Are you not serving Chippies with your peanut butter and jelly sandwiches?
Not for my child. I serve goldfish, Jill.
Oh, yeah, that's good. That's fine. That's fine for them. I'm
It's a
talking about for
similar Chippy.
grown adults.
For grown women.
We need Chippies. And the Friendletter.
All right, let's talk about cash. We're talking, so a lot, when you hear about cash, you hear about save a starter emergency fund, save a full emergency fund. And we don't really talk about cash savings outside of that. We maybe talk about sinking funds. We're using different verbiage in this conversation to try and get your head out of the traditional do this, do that kind of rhetoric and make you really think about how much cash do I need to be saving in my CIT high yield savings account, frugalfriendspodcast.com/CIT. So, and we're going to do that with our friend Brian Preston of the Money Guy show on YouTube and podcast. He is a brilliant financial advisor, has a team of 40 people, at their advisory firm. And he just wrote a book after creating free content since 2006, which if you've ever created content, that's a long time to be in the game. So he has seen the rise and fall of a lot of financial fads. He's been in the game for a long time. He's written a book called Millionaire Mission, a 9-step system to level up your finances and build wealth. And so he has spent 25 years financial planning. So they have over 600,000 followers across all their social channels. So we are just going to talk about one part of that. Actually, it's 2 parts of the 9-step system, and it's the savings part. So
we do get to a little bit of investing, so we don't want to totally throw you off there, but super great conversation. Let's get into it.
Brian, welcome to Frugal Friends podcast. We are delighted to have you on. Even after several technical difficulties, the internet has still provided us a safe haven for this interview, and we are grateful.
Haven't we all had those type of problems? Any content creator knows exactly the ghost in the machine is a real thing. So Jen, Jill, thank you so much for having me on. I'm super excited about this.
It's a delight. I'm so glad we persevered, especially because this is such a top of mind question for people. How much should I have saved? And of course, we know that there's not some pie in the sky number, but it's helpful to talk with experts on what could we be aimed for, because without that aim, we're going to be kind of a little bit floundering. So really pleased this conversation can finally happen.
Yes, absolutely. So we're talking a little bit about the stuff that's in your book, and it's only like one sliver of it, right? The savings part. So let's get into that though. You say the first step to becoming a millionaire is covering your deductibles. So like, how did you, because everybody says a starter emergency fund should be different for different reasons. Yeah. How did you land on that? And how do we do it?
Well, look, I'm not the first one to come up with a system on how to handle your money. It's just that, but I think it's my 30 years of managing money, doing financial planning, and then even my own journey from pretty humble beginnings to building wealth. And I started thinking about what actually derails people from just getting out of the starting gates. And really, it's the emergencies. If you look at how many bankruptcies are caused by medical things or medical issues where people can't pay bills, you quickly realize that if you want to give yourself a head start or make sure your journey into financial freedom doesn't get derailed, we got to cover the big catastrophic risk first. This is why when you see a system that says $1,000 or $2,000, that might be enough, but why don't we kind of make you bulletproof to a degree? And what I came up with is, what the first thing that you could do is just figure out what your highest insurance deductible is, since we're going to hopefully a good financial mutant is going to insure away any of these catastrophic things. So go write down what is your deductible on your renter policy or your homeowner policy, your auto policy, or your medical, policy at work. And then whatever the highest number is, that is the number you should have in step one, because that then lets you kind of be protected from the big catastrophic risk that could derail you, and then let you move on to the wealth building part where you start letting your money work and investing, paying off debt and so forth.
Nice. What do you usually find is like an average in like among your clients of what that highest deductible is?
It depends. I mean, because the thing is that health insurance has gotten to be a harder and harder finance issue for everyone. I mean, here in the office, because, I'm up to close to 40 employees now, is that health insurance is one of the most expensive things I pay for and one of the most hated things that my employees and I pay for. So it's ours is, even though I'm subsidizing it heavily, it still might be $3,000 to $4,000. Whereas I think if you work for like a Fortune 500 company that has that traditional health insurance plan, maybe it's only $1,500. So that's why it is important to actually don't skip the step of saying, hey, let's just do $1,000 or $2,000. I'm sure that's enough. No, actually go pull the documents and see what your insurance deductibles are so you don't find yourself in an oopsie situation, especially if you're in one of those high deductible health plans that put more of it on you so that you can have lower insurance premiums on the monthly basis.
Yeah, it is so interesting because so many people choose a high deductible plan so they have access to a health savings account without realizing like the difference it's going to be in the deductible. Like our deductible, I think, is like hovering around 5,000.
Mm-hmm.
That's our family deductible. So like, yeah, that's quite a bit, but it would cover. There's literally no emergency for us that would be more than 5,000. I think of like things like if your AC goes out in the middle of July, like being able to afford emergency repair. That's like kind of like my biggest concern for my emergency fund. But yeah, it's very much can vary. And I think like the health insurance is probably the biggest that I've seen.
Yeah, I think it's such a helpful metric because historically I have viewed the medical deductible as kind of the baseline for what you should base your emergency fund off of. But it's really helpful to hear you say all of your other types of insurances, even renter, homeowner, car insurance. These are pieces I have not considered factoring into it. Granted, those deductibles are much lower than my medical, but I think it's really helpful to pull it all together. And you kind of described that as almost like the baseline. I'm curious if there's anything else that you would describe as being a part of these emergency reserves. Jen just mentioned
sure. I mean, that's why
AC, but I don't know. What's your definition?
You make a good point, though. And this is why in the financial order of operations, my 9-step system, of course, everybody who's watching, listening to this can go to moneyguy.com/resources, download it completely free. And then, of course, there's Millionaire Mission. But cash reserves specifically gets 2 steps in my system. And what I mean by that, we just talked about highest deductible covered is step 1. That's just so your life doesn't get in the financial ditch for an unforeseen emergency that could happen, especially medical or a car accident or something like that. But then that also frees you up. Let's quickly talk about steps 2 and 3. Step 2 is the employer match. You know, I'm always shocked. We've done some research, and depending upon what study you look at, between 20 to 30% of participants or employees that have access to a 401k don't max out their match. And if your employer is offering you 50 cents on the dollar or dollar for dollar matching, that's like a 50% or 100% guaranteed rate of return. There's just very few things that are that strong and that important for your financial future. So that's why that's step 2, even before paying off in step 3, the high interest debt. Now, look, credit cards right now are charging over 20%. It's hard to get ahead when you're paying twice as much in interest to your credit card company as what you're hoping to earn on your investments. So that's why it is important to conquer those punitive debts as fast as possible, but don't leave behind the highest deductible covered. Don't leave behind the 50 to 100% guaranteed rate of return by your employer. But then, of course, pay off those high interest debts. But then that allows me to move to step 4, which is that second cash option in my system, which is expand your emergency reserves or rainy day done right. Because not all emergencies are the healthcare type or the auto accident. You know, I make the example in the book that maybe you drop your iPhone into the commode by accident. You know, there's things that can happen that cause trouble, or the hot water heater goes out in your house. You still need to be able to have emergencies, the money to cover that. Plus, what happens if you get laid off and you need something to cover 3, 6, maybe even beyond that if you work in an industry that's harder to cover or you have more people that are requiring your income that are counting on you. That's why we have 2 cash reserve setups within the financial order of operations.
Yeah, that's a helpful delineation and kind of the timeline of this can wait when we talk about prioritization, because most of us can't do all of it all at once. And so having some of these other voices helping us to discern what is a good order for my money when it's not unlimited, and being able to define that some of it does have to do with being out of work and some of it does have to do with these kind of nuisances. They're not, like you say, a medical emergency, but you still need to pay for them quickly. I mean, like maybe you could be without AC for a little bit of time. You won't die necessarily, but you do want to have the money set aside for
Florida in the summer, which is why this is my biggest fear. I would like to know if there are any, but from what you've seen with your clients, like, are there any emergencies that have come up where people have had to use their emergency fund where you were like, oh my gosh, I would have never thought of that. I would have never thought that as an emergency, like, would happen.
Well, I mean, like we just did our annual wealth survey for all of our clients, and we asked them, and I think this is probably a little different than what you mean, but I still think it's a pretty cool thing because it shows the power of having cash as well as having resources, and following a good system. Is like we ask clients, we say money is no more than it's just a tool. That is, it's not something that you centralize your life, but it is a very effective tool to help you fulfill things. And we asked our clients, what are the things that money as a tool have really helped you with? And one of my favorite things was how many in vitro fertilization people shared that they were having trouble growing their family. That in its own right, that's an emergency, because we all know that there's this season of life that you're having children and other things. And I think it's so awesome that what if something like that happens in your life, and it's nice if you have resources or you have savings so you can figure out where to prioritize your life. Of course, there's always the cash as a wealth builder as well. As I think about even in my own life, and I detail this in Millionaire Mission too, is cash can be a contra wealth builder, meaning contra in the fact that people just don't think about it. It's a sleeper, but when everybody else is broke, think about collapses of like 2008 with the Great Recession and the stock market's getting beaten up. I have a friend who bought $5,000 worth of Apple stock in 2008 that's now, he still owns it, by the way. I can see his accounts, and it's worth close to $500,000 because he had cash to buy when others didn't. I think about the fact that, like, this building that we're recording in, I was able to buy this because we had cash, because during the pandemic, the current owner, the owner before us, was kind of nervous about some things. So it's not uncommon that cash can be that sleeper wealth builder, but you don't even get those opportunities unless you're at least practicing having cash reserves. I'm always shocked, and y'all probably keep up with this stat too. Bankrate every year releases what percentage of Americans cannot come up with $1,000. And I start annoying this team here because I'm like, have they released it yet? Because you can set your clock. It's going to be around 60% of Americans can't come up with $1,000. This year, it's 56%. So I'm just telling you, the majority of our peers are not keeping cash. And that really, limits your ability to build wealth and resources. And I even think people who are good with money make a mistake because they think they have access to cash. So they'll instead of actually having cash reserves, they'll say, well, I have an investment portfolio that I could always liquidate, or they think I have a home equity line that I could at least write a check off of. And I'm telling you, I've been there, done that, made those mistakes. You want to actually have legitimate cash reserves. That's why it gets 2 steps in our system.
That's such a new concept. Like, not an emergency fund, not just for bad emergencies, but for emergency opportunities.
Yeah.
Because that, like, something similar happened to us. We are Airbnb hosts. And when Airbnb went on the stock market, we had the opportunity to buy it at IPO. And, like, we're not connected in any way. Like, we don't have the opportunity to buy IPOs ever. So, like, we had cash that we could just, buy some of that. And yeah, you're right. Like, we should have it for emergency opportunities as well, like unforeseen opportunities. What a great reframe.
Yeah. Exercising it.
I think this is one of the unique things, and realize I actually work in the industry. I have my own journey that I've built, and I've tried to share. I've thrown the kitchen sink at sharing all these unique things that I've kind of picked up with myself and my clients, because I think that is a contra or a different mindset than most people think about cash. They think about it's boring. Cash is trash, but not if you really understand the power of having resources when everybody else doesn't. That's why in the book, I say that cash is like the air we breathe. We all take it for granted until you're underwater. And that's the reality that most Americans get themselves into that situation. So you don't respect the access to cash or having the actual cash on hand.
Now that I have kids, I'm hyper aware of the information I put online. But unfortunately, there's only so much I can do. Our personal information is everywhere on the internet, and I don't have time to monitor and take it off every website. That's why I personally use Delete Me.
Delete Me is a service that finds and removes any personal information from hundreds of data broker websites and makes sure it stays off. Delete Me isn't just a one-time service. It's always working for you, constantly monitoring and removing the personal information you don't want on the internet.
I signed up, completed a questionnaire, and they took it from there, submitting opt-out requests to data broker sites and keeping my personal info private.
To take control of your data and keep your private life private by signing up for Delete Me. Now, at a special discount for our listeners, today get 20% off your Delete Me plan when you go to joindeleteme.com/frugal and use promo code FRUGAL at checkout. The only way to get 20% off is to go to joindeleteme.com/frugal and enter code FRUGAL at checkout. That's joindeleteme.com/frugal, code FRUGAL.
When it comes to ensuring your company has top-notch security practices, things can get complicated fast. Vanta automates compliance for ISO 27001 SOC 2 and more, saving you time and money. Unify your security program management and streamline security reviews with AI-powered security questionnaires. Over 7,000 global companies like Atlassian, Flow Health, and Cora use Vanta to build trust and prove security in real time. Access Vanta's free suite of resources to scale your governance, risk, and compliance program at vanta.com/special. That's VANTA.com/special.
This is Neil Strauss, host of the Tenderfoot TV true crime podcast, To Live and Die in LA. I'm here to tell you about the new podcast I've been undercover investigating for the last year and a half. It's called To Die For. Here's a clip.
All these girls were sent out into the world and they were told, try to meet important men, try to attach yourself to important men.
The voice you're hearing is a Russian model agent telling me about spies sent out to seduce men with political power.
The war in Ukraine is also being fought by all these girls that are all over important cities.
For the first time, a military-trained seduction spy reveals how the Russian government turned sex and love into a deadly weapon.
If you want to kill your target, it's easy. You just seduce him, take him somewhere, start having sex, and then he's very vulnerable, so you can kill him easily.
To Die For is available now. Listen for free on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
So how do we know when it's time to decrease or increase the amount we have in cash as life evolves? Because there is kind of a law of diminishing returns, right? So how do we gauge how much cash to be saving?
Yeah, well,
or to have on hand?
It's back. Key point, cash, the whole purpose is, yes, it can be a wealth builder, but also it's just to keep your financial life out of the ditch. So you have to, you're right. I mean, I don't want everybody to have 60% of their money in cash waiting for the next failure, because you'll be waiting a long time. Typically, markets in the financial world is up 8 out of 10 years. So you actually do want to make sure that you're growing your wealth and investing for the long term. So when people ask me how much, and that's why I spent an entire section of how to do rainy day done right, is that think about these type of things. Are you 3 months? Or are you 6 months? You hear all these financial commentators say 3 to 6 months, but they never give you the clarification. And I'm willing to actually go a little beyond common sense on this. And I always say, look, if you're like an accountant or an engineer and there's jobs in every town and you could replace your job very easily, it's a very portable job, 3 months, especially if you're a single person, you probably could do 3 months cash reserves, no problem. If you live in a household where both spouses work and have good incomes, you can be closer to 3 months, because if one gets laid off, you've got the fill in from the other spouse. However, if you live in a house where maybe one spouse is stay at home raising the kids and then the other spouse is out there working, you probably want to go 6 months and beyond. If you work for a company and you're in a high paid job and your job, hey, look, I make a great living, but it's very focused in this geographic area, or maybe it's going to take me 9 months to go get a new job because of what I do is so specialized, have cash reserves that reflect that risk that's sitting out there. So you can triage very quickly, where is your risk at based upon this 3 to 6 months? And then we even give the guidance that as you get close to retirement, you might see that your cash reserves actually swells up to 18 months and beyond, because then you walk through a whole new risk where now you're worried about, hey, if next time the market goes down, I no longer can't just say, well, it's all right, I'll just buy through it, I'll just keep working, it'll be okay. You're now going to deal with the psychological impact of, hey, I'm no longer working. I'm living off of what my financial resources do. This is going to hit me emotionally different than it ever has before. So you need to have a little extra cushion in cash so you don't make any of those emotional reaction decisions that we see so often when we're researching this type of stuff.
Do you have any recommendations on how often someone should reevaluate this number? Like, is it an annual kind of thing? Is it just at every job change, at the birth of a kid? When do you think this should be reevaluated?
You just laid off. You just named off a lot of the key things. It is obviously when big life things are happening, job changes, growing family, or something is changing in your household. But also, one of the habits that I talk about, because I always say make the good habits as easy as possible so that you can automate your wealth building. I love having the habit of doing an annual net worth statement. So every year when I do my annual net worth statement, I automatically am looking at where cash is. It's just like when we were show prepping, I knew I was having this interview. You guys asked a question about cash reserves and how I process that personally. And I was like, that's no problem. I have that right on my net worth statement. I'll be able to share that. And I think that's why it's an important habit if you are monitoring your net worth, because not only will it help you with cash reserves, it will know how your debt load is. It will let you know how your assets or your investments are performing relative to your income. There's all kind of cool metrics and dashboards you can use to just make sure you're financially in a healthy and a good spot.
Yeah, this next question might come as a little bit of a curveball, so
that's all right.
Do with it what you will. But some of this conversation is making me think back to the times that I was full-time social work. And I know we've got a lot of teachers listening and people who just are not high income earners. And I remember when I was fully in that space, hearing conversations like this and being like, yeah, that'd be great. I'd love to have all of my insurance deductibles paid and all of my 3 to 6 months extra in case I'm out of work and all of these things, but it feels so unattainable. I'm curious if you've got clients, like what you say to them. And of course, sometimes it can just be look for ways to earn more, but are there any pieces that you've utilized to help people kind of move through these steps if the steps feel like, man, it's going to take me so long to get to that point? What would you say to that person?
No, this is a great question. This is one of the things I focus on a lot in the mindset, because I think all of us who work in personal finance, especially the content side of it, we focus on the math a lot. I think we're just naturally math-minded people, but that's only half of the equation. You also have to have the mindset right. And I think that especially in the current, there's a lot of voices on social media. We just did a whole show yesterday on, is the economy doomed? Because it just seems like there's this doom speak everywhere, and everybody, it's hard to be an optimist when you're struggling financially. So I always tell people, this is why it's important to know what the next small decision you can make. And that's why I did create a system, is because, you think about math, going back to math-minded people, PEMDAS, the reason it's so awesome, when you think about the order of operations, you have to solve math this way to get the right answer. In a lot of ways, finance is the same way. That's why I try to give you what to do with your next dollar. So if you are feeling overwhelmed with the journey, because if you're thinking about, man, I have not only, we call it the messy middle, where you got the family, you're short on time, you're short on money, and all these things are pulling on you, and you're like, oh my gosh, how am I going to conquer this when I have so many things that feel like they're working against me? If you can know just what small decision, what's the next thing to focus on, you won't get overwhelmed by all the other stuff. Now, let's get to the actual nuts and bolts of how do you actually do this? That's why I love that, like, step one, and I know we spent a lot of time on, that's just going to keep you protected. It's safe, but it's still going to let you move on to step two, especially if you're a teacher or somebody else. What I love about this is because later in the book, you'll see I have a savings and investment rate, which everybody's going at the cuff, they'll be like, that's high, because I say 20 to 25%. You're like, how do you do that? Well, I say, well, wait a minute. If you have a household income under $200,000, you can count your employer match. And a lot of teachers have pension contributions that are, 8 to 12% of their income is going in to fund this pension. Well, right there, we just cut what your portion you have to save and invest down to maybe 10%, or maybe somewhere between 10 to 15%. So that lets you get back to that step two. And then you can look at the debt. And then I love when we get into the Roth IRAs of like step 5, because then, it doesn't take a lot to move the needle. We did a case study on a recent show for somebody at a very modest income, but they still reach 7-figure status, because if you just will do something, just start the process of letting compounding growth, you'll find that 94 to 95% of your terminal, meaning your account value at retirement, is the growth, not your investment. It's the growth, but you have to actually get the initial investment in, even if it's a little bit. I don't care if it's $50 a month. Just do something, because it builds on top of itself, but you have to start the process somewhere.
It's such a beautiful reality for us medium income earners that we can still find ourselves decades down the road with a significant amount of money because of investing, and particularly investing for retirement, which you started to talk on that. And I'm curious if you have more to say about percentages of income that you would recommend people invest for retirement, why those percentages, what's kind of the baseline there.
Yeah. And I know I keep throwing it back to my website, but we really do try to give away tons of free stuff so people can have these answers to help them through their journeys. On moneyguy.com/resources, we have a deliverable titled What 25% Can Do for You. And what we do is it's kind of a chart. It's really cool how it's laid out in a grid system where it will show if you're saving 25% by age, what that will replace at retirement. And you'll quickly see that somebody who's in their 20s, if you're saving 25%, you're going to retire with more money than you actually make, meaning it will replace greater than 100% of probably what your retirement income is. So that means you can dial it down. But if you start in your 30s, you're going to see that, hey, probably somewhere between 20 to 25% is still going to get you somewhere between that 80 to 100% replacement of your income at retirement. And then if you start at your 40s and beyond, there's still a chance. 40s is not a disaster. You're going to be able to replace 60%. You stack on top of that Social Security, you're going to be okay. But you ought to at least have some type of metric to know what savings rate will replace what. And I think very few financial content creators are showing that math. So that way you can kind of know what every dollar can do for you, and kind of, look in your own situation and figure out how you're going to apply this on your savings rate. Obviously, the earlier you start, the better and easier this is. So maybe somebody in their 20s can start somewhere around 15%. But if you start at 40, 45, you might have to save and invest greater than 25%. So there's a whole behavior as well as an action report to show you what to do.
Yeah, I love, so the common thought is to just wait and then invest more later. But the math is so inverse. If you invest that 25% in your 20s, you can invest less and less and less down the road.
Yep.
And overall, what you put into your retirement you're going to save so much money by investing more in your 20s and 30s than waiting till your 40s. So what we did was we invested 50% of our income in our 20s, and then we had our kids in our 30s, and then we just kind of cut that all the way down to sometimes not investing at all. And we're still going to be okay because we invested before we had kids. So I know a lot of our listeners don't have kids yet, and it's a great time to use all that money that you would be spending in diapers and just train yourself to live without it now. Just train yourself to live without it.
In chapter, I have a chapter called Boiling Point. Now, it sounds like I'm saying bowling. I don't know why I can't say boiling, but I'm trying to talk.
There you go.
Because people, they give up way too soon. And so I use the chapter that sits in between steps, when we get to step 7 and beyond, where you're getting beyond the basics. I want to motivate people because I feel like if you're younger, you need to kind of know how important those early years are. So that's why we have a case study in the book. And it's not like I came up with this. I see this all over the place. I remember the first time I went and talked to a high school class, I had some curriculum from a credit union that I was using, and it made this same point. You take somebody who saves and invests from 20 to 30, meaning 10 years only, and then you compare that to somebody who starts saving and investing at 30 all the way to age 65, even though the person who saves from 30 to 65 is going to save like 3 times the amount that the person saved from 20 to 30. They just can't catch or beat the person who saved and invested from 20 to 30 because the value of time is just so powerful to really, to your point, Jen, as you were kind of sharing that. And that's why we always tell people, back to the website, I can't help it, but if you go to moneyguy.com/resources, we have our wealth multiplier. And what I like to show people, and you see it on this koozie, is if you knew like $1 for a 20-year-old is worth $88, it has the potential to become that. $1 for a 30-year-old only has the potential to become $23. $1 for a 40-year-old only has the potential to become $7. $1 for a 50-year-old, that's where I'm at, only has the potential to become $3. You'll look at money completely differently. And that's why if you're anywhere in between those ages, if you'll go to the website, we actually give you the wealth multiplier by every age. So even for your babies. So if you have like children and you're like, well, I want to make sure I'm saving something for them, or, so they can take advantage of their 100+ multiplier, let's do it. Because that's why I think when you're young and you're in your 20s, you're broke. I was broke as a joke through most of my 20s, plus life's pulling at you. So you're like, I can't do this. The system's working against me. But if you just do $50 a month, it would change your life. I mean, that's where I had an economics teacher in high school. Wasn't part of the curriculum. I detail this in the first intro chapter of the book. He came in one day, and I don't know if it was out of regret or if it was just he had learned this concept of compounding growth. But he goes, guys, if every one of you would save $100 a month, you'd be a millionaire by the time you're retired. And I was working at the Hardee's drive-thru at the time, making $3.80 an hour because I'm old. And I remember thinking I could save $100 a month, even making $3.80. And that put me on this journey to think about what money can become in a completely different way. While everybody out there is saying, you can't, the system's stacked against you. Meanwhile, I have a teacher tells me $100 a month is going to change my life. Sign me up.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. I have one last question, and this one's mostly for me. What percentage of your net worth would you say is reasonable to have in cash? Or what is average, or should I not be asking that question?
Now, this is something I thought about this question, and I want to clarify this a little bit. And the fact, because I thought about net worth is one thing, and then investable assets is something completely different. Because, like, if I told you as a percentage of my net worth, my cash is probably 1% or less, so that seems really small. But then if I clarify that and I say, my cash as a percentage of my investable assets, meaning like IRAs, 401ks, my taxable accounts, all the things that you think about that you're going to live off of in retirement, that number is 7.5%. So you see how there's a little bit of clarification, because this is what I make the point on the show all the time. Money, becoming wealthy is incredibly simple, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's easy. And what I mean by that is that as you get more and more successful, your life is going to get complicated naturally, even if you're trying to keep your life as simple as possible. So you take somebody like me, I started this journey off very simply, no money, and started the process. But now, if you saw my tax return with all the K-1s, the commercial real estate, the multiple ventures, the 40 employees, it's just, that's why my situation's different. So, but I want to make sure I highlight, don't get caught up in as a percentage of net worth. Look at it in terms of what cash can do to replace the expenses of your life. Know what your burn rate is. Know what your monthly household cost is. So then you can have the cash to use as a resource when you need it. That's really the purpose of it, is to cover those desperate times, but also to keep a little bit. Once you get to step 8 of my system, I don't want you hoarding cash, waiting for those great opportunities. I want this to be kind of an amplifier after you've built the financial foundation underneath you through steps 1 through 7. But I do like step 8, having a little extra cash, especially if you have employees or people counting on you. You've got to protect yourself and them so that the uncertainty doesn't take you out.
Speaking of multipliers,
something that is not full of uncertainty, or is, but in a good way.
A significant percentage of this episode.
The Bill of the Week.
That's right. It's time for the best minute of your entire week. Maybe a baby was born and his name is William. Maybe you paid off your mortgage. Maybe your car died and you're happy to not have to pay that bill anymore. Duck bills, Buffalo Bills, Bill Clinton. This is the Bill of the Week.
So,
Brian, every week we ask our listeners and our guests to share with us their bill for the week, and we would love to hear yours.
I thought about this because you guys were very generous. You gave me a heads up about this, and I got to tell you, my answers improved since y'all very transparent and shared we had some technical problems the first time we tried to do this. I had 2 answers. I had the personal finance answer for I think most people out there, and then I have any of your entrepreneurs or business owners that are out there. I have a little tip, and it's not endorsed. I don't get paid for sharing this, but I can't help because I'm just so excited about it, and that's how nerdy I am. But for everybody, I think you really ought to automate your bill pay process. So when I think of bills, I think of automating your bill pay. Just like I talk about inevitable automatic wealth building with your investing, I think that if you can set up as many of your bills to be paid in an automated fashion, I think about my utilities, I think about my insurance policies and other things. I have those things and I get notifications because I'm that nerdy. I actually want to see what the numbers are, but I do make them pay automatically because I think that if I can automate that thing, all those processes, it will make my life easier. For my business owners, something I've discovered, I was having the worst time with some of my bigger vendors. They wanted me to pay them ACH. I reached out to my bank and I said, hey, I need to start paying these people ACH. And they were like, well, that's hard for businesses. We don't necessarily do that. So I started doing research and I found this company, and I found out all these big Fortune 500 companies use it too. It's Bill.com. And it is revolutionized how I'm paying bills to all my vendors now. Like I said, I get no endorsement from that. I get no fees, no affiliate. I don't do any of that junk. But it's just when I find something that's cool, I tell people. So now I have one of my administrators. We can do all this stuff. So those are my 2 bills of the week.
Yes. We have been paid via Bill.com before. That is a legitimate.
We've been the recipients.
It makes it easy. It really does. And it's not
that
expensive for relative to the time. Like now I find myself, like if I'm stuck at an airport or I'm stuck somewhere, I can just open up my bill app and then I'm like paying vendors left and right. And truthfully, I think all the people who work with us love it because they're getting paid quicker. Because in the past, I was batch bill paying. I was putting everything in a Nilla folder, right by my administrator. And then once a month I was coming in there like Ebenezer Scrooge and writing checks and sending them out to everybody. Now it's just as they come in, they get paid. And I feel like I'm just more efficient and automated. And I like that. It's back to that. Automate and make your wealth building journey inevitable. It doesn't just have to be on the investing. It can be on the bill pay as well.
Yeah, it's crazy. As people who have personal finance podcasts and as listeners of personal finance podcasts, we think that everybody has their bills automated. That's like step 1. And then I was listening to Ramit Sethi's podcast, and he had a couple on who did not have their bill. They made $250,000 a year, did not have their bills automated.
What about banks?
And I was like, it's still not everybody does it. So if you're listening to this and you assume everybody does it, don't. Tell your friends to go automate their bills. We can't reach everyone. We all have to work
banks
together.
Are making. Go look at a bank's financial report and you'll realize, no, a lot of people haven't automated a lot of things in their life because they're bouncing checks. They're, they're paying all these missed payment fees. There's all kind of things that you will just avoid yourself that heartache if you can automate your life.
If you all who are listening want to or have worked smarter, not harder, or you've got an app called Bill.com, or you are a bill.
You've helped your friend automate a bill.
Yes. Visit frugalfriendspodcast.com/bill. Leave us your bill. We are ready for it.
This is Neil Strauss, host of the Tenderfoot TV true crime podcast, To Live and Die in LA. I'm here to tell you about the new podcast I've been undercover investigating for the last year and a half. It's called To Die For. Here's a clip.
All these girls were sent out into the world and they were told, try to meet important men, try to attach yourself to important men.
The voice you're hearing is a Russian model agent telling me about spies sent out to seduce men with political power.
The war in Ukraine is also being fought by all these girls that are all over important cities.
For the first time, a military-trained seduction spy reveals how the Russian government turned sex and love into a deadly weapon.
If you want to kill your target, it's easy. You just seduce him, take him somewhere, start having sex, and then he's very vulnerable, so you can kill him easily.
To Die For is available now. Listen for free on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, acclaimed comics writer and notorious Scott Summers hater, Rosie Knight.
Well, hello, Emmy-winning podcaster and totally unbiased Targaryen royal supporter, Jason Concepcion.
Rosie, somehow the X-Ray Vision podcast has returned. It feels so good.
It does. And like always, we'll be here every week covering the wide world of TV, movies, comics, and geek culture.
That's right. We'll be talking about Batman, heroes of that stature, and of course, we'll be inviting our friends in the industry to come geek out with us and share stories. We'll hear from TV writers, from actors, comics creators, pop culture critics, and more.
Nothing is off the table because geek culture is pop culture, and we can't wait to share our love of it all with you every single week.
Listen to X-Ray Vision on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Get emotional with me, Radhi Devlukia, in my new podcast, A Really Good Cry. We're going to talk about and go through all the things that are sometimes difficult to process alone. We're going to go over how to regulate your emotions, diving deep into holistic personal development, and just building your mindset to have a happier, healthier life. We're going to be talking with some of my best friends.
I didn't know we were going to go there on this.
People that I admire.
When we say listen to your body, really tune into what's going on.
Authors of books that have changed my life.
Now you're talking about sympathy, which is different than empathy, right?
And basically have conversations that can help us get through this crazy thing we call life.
I already believe in myself. I already see myself. And so when people give me an opportunity, I'm just like, oh, great, you see me too.
We'll laugh together, we'll cry together, and find a way through all of our emotions. Never forget, it's okay to cry as long as you make it a really good one. Listen to A Really Good Cry with Radhi Devlukia on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
And now it's time for
the lightning round. Pew, pew, pew. So that last question from the interview is kind of a teaser, if you will, to the lightning round. And it is, what percentage of your net worth is in cash? Let's get vulnerable.
This is Jen's vulnerability round. We call it the lightning round, Pat.
It's Jen's vulnerability round is what it really is. Brian, we'll let you go
as I shared kind of earlier, net worth wise, it's probably 1%. But if you look at my investable assets, it's 7.5%. But I have 40 employees and a lot of people counting on me. And that's not even counting the cash in my companies. So that's just me sharing, but I also shared earlier in the interview that I use cash as an opportunity builder because I'm beyond step 8 of the financial order of operations.
Well, we are not at step 8 or beyond. So this will just be vulnerability for Jill and I. So for me, it is 3%, which is, we just finished a 2-year renovation. 2 years ago, we bought a fixer-upper and we reserved cash in order to cash flow renovations. And we just finished up those renovations. And so I went from having this large cushion of cash for several years to now just having 3%. I almost feel naked. It makes me feel very vulnerable. This is my vulnerability round. I went to the bank this morning because we had an insurance check that we needed to deposit. And I looked, they gave me the receipt with my updated balance before and after, and I'm like, it's just so little. Oh.
But do you have your deductibles covered? Like, do you still have your
my emergency fund's not in that account. So yeah, I have my emergency fund.
Are you not counting that as part of this 3%?
No, I am.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I am. It's just like the amount. So spoiler, this is not the best practice, but we kept that money in our regular checking account, like our spending checking account, for years. So that's why it felt, but I never counted that money as spendable money because I knew what it was for. I guess not everybody can do that. That's why we tell people to keep it separate, but we did not. So yeah, but now that money is just all gone and everything looks like a regular account, and it feels.
But you feel
so
pressure.
low.
That's the important part.
So
I mean,
low.
I tell people, I think all through life, that's why we talk about the messy middle of life, is that I think it's common. Everybody thinks when you go through like a system like financial order of operations, it's going to be steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way through 9, is you're just walking up a set of stairs. But I have found you'll go to step 5 and then you'll bounce back to step 4 because of a home renovation or something. Or maybe you get laid off. There is going to be volatility or change within your whole process. So I love the fact that of what you just shared, Jen, is that you feel it's low and you feel some pressure. That's going to make you self-regulate and probably fix this or get it back on to where you feel comfortable that much sooner.
I know, but now I have to figure out what is comfortable because I have the emergency fund, right? I'm so used to having like quite a bit of money in the checking
only there
account
was a
where I can
resource
just, like,
that
spend money. As he holds up his book for the camera.
It is tough to define your enough, I think, because I think when you're so dead set on saving for this, then it can feel difficult to then move your mindset into investing and not touching it and not having those numbers available to you. My current percentage of net worth that I have in cash is 10%. That's more reflective of my entire net worth than it is about me making poor decisions. So that 10% is just what we need. I've got my 3 months of living expenses and all of our deductibles covered with that amount. And the net worth just isn't that high at this point in life. So that's the amount of cash we need to have.
But you're still in your early 30s.
Yeah. Oh,
for
can we
another
say that
couple months. You have like 4 months to say
30
that.
Sounds
you have
like
4
you
months
still
to
have
say
so much time to catch up. So I think you're in a great place, Jill. Don't be too hard on yourself. The big thing is you doing
Thanks,
something
Brian.
for sure.
Appreciate that. Well, you've plugged a lot already, but we're going to give you one last chance to tell our people where can they get more from you?
I promise, because I see content like that. And you're like, oh my God, this is just an infomercial. But we really have tried to give away so much free information because it's all, we call it the abundance cycle. I just want people to come get as much of the free stuff as they can because it is self-serving. I mean, if you do this well enough and you reach a level of success, there is, other asks that come. But while you're in the growth part, take the free stuff. So that's why I'll give two plugs.
Sure.
Of course, moneyguy.com is our main hub. But if you add /resources, tons, that's where all the free stuff lies. And then, of course, right now, I poured my life and soul for the last few years into Millionaire Mission. We've been creating digital content since 2006 when I started podcasting. I've never done traditional media like a book, but I really, instead of, and it's my philosophy of back to that abundance cycle, I didn't hold back. So this isn't one of those things where you have to buy the book and then I tease you into hiring me before you get the actual nuts and bolts and details. I actually give you the actual answers. I mean, if you go through this book, everything it's just like you guys were just talking about. The mindset part, you feel like you're trying to figure out the math of it. But I'm very hard on the mindset and the fact that I'm such a sentimental sap. Now that I've gotten older and I realize what money can and cannot do, I'm trying to tell people in each phase of your life to still live your best life, bedazzle your basic life if you can't afford much, because it just goes so fast. So there's a balance between the math and then the journey. And I've really tried to pour that in. So if you go to moneyguy.com/millionaire mission, I really do hope people will see that perfect intersection of both the money and mindset. And then if you just want to be nosy, the last chapter of this book, because it ties into y'all's question about cash reserves and other things, tells you exactly what I do with my money. So, and I even pick on people when you read that chapter, it says, did you actually read the book or did you just go jump to the back to see how I invest and handle my money?
Nice.
I loved that.
Excellent,
Bedazzle
Brian.
your basic life. I want you to have a hat that says basic with bedazzle. Just that.
Don't we all do it? I mean, I was talking to my wife about this, is that, sometimes, and look, I'm all about the all-inclusives and going on those romantic trips, but sometimes all you need to bedazzle your basic life, just go on the evening walk. When the weather's good and everything's green and you're in the spring, that costs absolutely nothing. And you'll find that you might have just as good of a time just having those conversations. I think about this past weekend, we have a warranty claim on a mattress. So we loaded up the entire family and we're riding around to these different stores trying to find these different versions of this manufacturer's mattress so we can get it. And I told my wife at the end of the day, I was like, I know that was not what the kids would think would be a fun day, but there was actually some fun, it was just good family time. So just as I say, time in the market is more important than timing the market. Spending time with your family is more important than the money you're spending on expensive vacations or stuff that likely they'll forget.
Yes.
So true.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Brian. This has been
I'm glad we made
great.
it happen. This was a blast. Y'all were a lot of fun. And thank you for being so generous with your time and let me on the show.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
I'm still thinking about that emergency funds, not just for the negative emergencies, but for emergency opportunities. And yes, it's niche. It's not something that you need or is even 100% advisable to do with your emergency fund unless you're in a really good place financially. But that is something that we have done before and we're able to do on a whim because of having that emergency fund.
I think you've really got to have cash reserves for a while before you start going on a limb thinking, oh, we haven't had a rainy day in a while, so I'll just use this for you name it.
I'm thinking once in a lifetime opportunities, like buying real estate in 2008, once in a lifetime opportunity. Buying commercial real estate in 2020, once in a lifetime opportunity.
Yeah, but again, you've got to have a pretty good understanding of the economy, what's happening, your money, the type of risk that you can hold. That is not common advice that I would give to every person. And I would call that cash reserves, not dipping into your emergency fund. Because if your emergency fund is there for your true emergencies, the life-threatening things that can go on, we do not want to be compromising that cash.
This is so true. This is 100% true. But I still love the reframe.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And I think I love how he was saying once you get comfortable having that cash, once you've exercised that muscle and you kind of understand the seasons of your cash flow, having some extra cash lying around can be helpful.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for listening. I hope that you got something out of this conversation about cash. And if you did, we would love it if you would leave a review. We love reading your kind reviews. Kind of like this one from LJohnT55 says, I thought I've heard it all. Just happens to be 5 stars. I am loving the tips and new frugality tips I'm learning. I especially love the food and meal planning tips, which is my hardest. Also, the resale and eBay tips. Thank you. Great distinction between cheap and frugal. Keep going. This distinctive frugal mindset has helped us really prioritize how we're spending money, and for me has given me permission to buy some things I really do value, but might have talked myself out of before. Thank you.
Thank you, LJohnT55. I'm so glad that you're finding some fresh perspectives. There's so much that has already been said, but is still worth repeating. But then it is helpful when you find some kind of like new perspectives or new ways of saying it that help some of these concepts click. So I'm glad you found that here. If you all are listening, you've liked the show for a while, or even you've liked it for a short time and you haven't left a review yet, please do so. It really, really does help us. It's a free thing you can do to show your support, and we love free.
We love free. And once we hit 1,000 reviews on Apple, we're going to let you vote on what little treat we should reward ourselves with. I've just
like, what are you about to give away?
We're gonna reward ourselves with a little treat, and we're gonna let you pick it.
And you can only pick it and poll what our little treat's going to be if you're getting the friend letter.
The friend letter. So definitely frugalfriendspodcast.com. Get the friend letter. See you next time. Frugal Friends is produced by Eric Siriani.
Speaking of cash, Jen, yesterday I keep like actual cash. I mean, I'm sure most listeners know that when we talk about cash emergency fund, we're keeping it in a high yield savings account.
Yeah,
and we're earning interest on that.
Bills.
Yeah. But I do have some actual cash in my home
that you hid in your Christmas box so that you can find it next Christmas.
LOL. I forget if I actually did that. I don't think I did because Eric thought it was silly.
Everyone thought it was silly too.
Yeah, well. No, I'm not going to tell you exactly where I keep it, but I keep it in a safe space.
Because I'm here all the time.
Yeah, I could take it from me.
Can we walk there now? Where it's
No,
at?
not with our microphones. No, it's not close enough to touch right now.
Okay.
Anyhow, Eric and I have been selling a lot. I don't know. We're just going on a rampage. He's selling a lot of different music equipment so that he could buy a different thing of music equipment. And I don't know. As we've gotten to the end of our renovation and clearing out the garage and cleaning that up, we've just like been selling stuff on Facebook Marketplace. So I finally thought I should count that. I should see how much money we have there. And because we've just been like shoving cash into wherever it is that we keep it.
Not close enough to touch right now.
Yeah.
Not behind the neon sign.
And I laid it all out on the desk and counted it. And it was $2,500.
Wow.
I know. This is like over a year of selling things, but still. But then I kind of got a little bit sad because I realized that that's what I need every single month to cover my mortgage and utilities. Like it looked like a ton of money on the table. And I'm like, I need this amount. Like this would just cover 1 month of me living here and using the water and electricity.
We did that when Travis sold his motorcycle. He got $2,000 for it. And I was like, this covers daycare for 2 months.
Yeah.
In 2 months, this is gone.
What took us about a year of selling things on Facebook Marketplace would only cover 1 month. However, it also could highlight the flip side of that you can bring in that amount of money monthly to be able to keep covering that. And then it just makes me feel like money's fake.
Well, you can't. There's a limit, right? You can't sell everything. You can't keep selling. You only have a finite amount of things.
Exactly. Yeah. And it took that long to get that amount of money. But yet, yeah, jobs can pay
it could be
more than that.
It could be a fun experiment to sell have a goal just to go through your house and sell as much as you can to pay for one mortgage payment.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, I don't want to go through and sell on Facebook Marketplace. It's too much work. What if your goal was just to sell enough to earn one mortgage payment, and then once you did that, then you got rid of everything? You're like, it's fine.
Right. There is an end
it.
in sight. You don't have to keep going with it.
There you go. There's a fun little challenge for June and July. There's your summer challenge right now.
I love it.
Have fun.
It's brand new, season 2. I'm Marissa Thalberg.
And I'm Stephen Wolf-Bedeta. And we're excited to be back having bigger, bolder, and always real conversations.
Straight from the C-suite front lines of marketing, media, and more.
We have great friends joining from people you may know, like Vilmer Valderrama and Bobby Burke.
And people you'll want to know. So grab a coffee or, hey, even an Aperol Spritz and come join us on America's #1 podcast network, iHeart.
Listen to brand new on the iHeart Radio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi there, I'm Bob Pittman, Chairman and CEO of iHeartMedia. I'm excited to announce a new season of my podcast, Math and Magic, Stories from the Frontiers of Marketing. Our guests this season show us big risk can yield big rewards, like Rob Riley, the creative head of one of the world's leading advertising firms.
I try to create environments where anybody can say anything without any judgment.
Listen to a brand new season of Math and Magic on our very own iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcast, or wherever you get your podcast.
Hey there, I'm Dr. Maya Shankar, and I'm a scientist who studies human behavior. Many of us have experienced a moment in our lives that changes everything, that instantly divides our life into a before and an after. On my podcast, A Slight Change of Plans, I talk to people about navigating these moments. Their stories are full of candor and hard-won wisdom. And you'll hear from scientists who teach us how we can be more resilient in the face of change. Listen on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.